Okay. Roll call. Angela Delaporta,
Here.
Kristen Flynn,
Here.
Terry Halsemer,
Here.
Gail Price,
Here.
Heather Rosen, Lance Smith, Yunan Song,
Here.
Tim Steele,
Here.
Lakiba Pittman, Si Zhang, Alexander Liu,
Here.
Keith Rektal,
Here.
Doria Suma,
Here.
Waldemar Kamarski. Okay. So that's the end of the roll call.
Great, thank you, Chitra. And so we'll start with a little bit of our housekeeping. Welcome everybody to our meeting. We are focused tonight on transportation, particularly pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. And again, thank you much to Angela Della Porta, whose tireless efforts continue to impress and inspire staff to really bring our best. So we thank you so much for your work, Angela, that you've put into this project and to tonight's meeting. I also want to make sure that we highlight that Claire Campbell is with us. She is our new long-range planning manager. I think she joined us for our last few meetings, but she is there. Claire, do you want to wave and maybe say a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. So I have been with the city for quite a number of years, and I've worked in various sections of our planning department. So I hope to jump right into our NVCAP project and start moving things along and helping things out with our effort here. Yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Claire. And we are really, really lucky to have her on this project. She's very knowledgeable and she's definitely a go-getter. So I'm super excited to be working with Claire on this project. And then I want to acknowledge that we have some speakers tonight who you'll be hearing from, and want to thank Gail Price for helping to reach out to those folks and identify some leaders and thought leaders and people who will pursue and get housing done to help us. We also have our transportation staff, Sylvia Starlack and Joanna Chan, who are here with us as well. So our in-house experts are here as well. And I do want to just acknowledge an oversight in my part in our staff report. We do try always to publish any correspondence that we receive from members of the public in our staff reports and in packets. And so there was some correspondence that was included without the cover sheet of notifying that it was correspondence that was received and is distributed. So the SV at Home, their correspondence with us is included. But again, that is a public party, individual group, anybody who sends a correspondence to NVCAP, we do try to publish that for the benefit of conversation. So if that was misleading in any way, I do apologize to folks for that. So we are going to start. If there are no questions or comments from working group members, anything from members? Seeing nothing, I'll just do one quick Zoom orientation for those who may be joining us for the first time. Of course, we are continuing to meet remotely due to the coronavirus pandemic, and to ensure that we can try to do our best to continue the work of the public in public as we can on Zoom, but at safe distances, and ensuring that we can try to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And so if it's your first time on Zoom, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you should see a participant tab. If you click that, you should see maybe a panel on the right side of your screen that says panelists, and then attendees at the upper part of that list. If you click attendees, you should see yourself. If you are an attendee, or if you're a member of the working group, you'll be a panelist. And at the bottom of that, you should see an option to raise your hand. You can use the raise hand function if you would like to speak, and to make sure that we can know that you're here to give public comment. We do have a time for oral communications at the beginning, and then we also have that at the end. If you are calling in, which I don't see anybody on the phone, if you are calling in, you have to press *9 to raise your hand. And also you may have to press *6 to unmute yourself. So just that little Zoom infomercial out of the way. We will go now to public comment. If you are here to give oral communications, please raise your digital hand, and then Chitra will make sure that you are in the queue to speak. If you do plan to speak, please raise your hand now so we can get a sense of how many speakers we can anticipate in our oral communications. We'll give a second for folks to raise their hands. And right now we have 4 speakers. Chitra, if you would call those speakers, and then you will have 3 minutes. And we have Nikki Loriola, who's on our team. Nikki will come on screen. Can you come on screen, Nikki? When your time is up, and she will say time, and that will be the indication that your time is up. So there we have it. So Chitra, we're ready to begin.
Yes, our first speaker is Arthur Keller. Arthur?
Community. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to talk about the priorities of affordable housing and traffic reduction. The traffic report doesn't focus on solving these problems. Rather, it talks about creating more density and more market rate housing and more offices in Ventura. Doing so will hurt rather than help. Adding offices and thousands of market rate housing will make neighborhood problems far worse. The staff report talks about traffic mitigation, doesn't talk about admit that putting new offices and thousands of housing units in a small area, just 100 residents right now, will create unmitigatable traffic nightmares. When, simply put, we have to convert office sites to housing. We have not enough housing. The first good start is the conversion of the Fry site to housing, which is already zoned for housing, and convert it to we should have converted it already. And therefore, Fry's departure will make that decision easier. The site is not a good retail location. It has 30,000. The latest notion is to have just 30,000 square feet. In other words, 1/3 of the Fry site of the site that contains Fry's building. And the other 87% offices, which hardly is worth the trouble. They should fund affordable housing. Let's stop pretending that 1,000 affordable housing units are still needed to afford one of 261 offices to create one affordable housing unit. 261 offices to create impact fees to one affordable housing unit. That's ridiculous. We need to raise $60 per office per employee, which is not going to bankrupt any company in Palo Alto. Once the economy recovers, past polling indicates voters in Palo Alto will approve such a tax, even a longer one. So it's larger one focuses on proper priorities. In short, the MD cap needs a strong dose of reality. Building more offices and upscale housing won't solve our problems. They'll make them worse. Let's reduce traffic and make huge strides in providing affordable housing, definitely needed by responsible zoning and funding choices. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Our next speaker is Rebecca Sanders.
Hi, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Well, I hope that Arthur Keller, thank you so much. I'm hoping that I can get a copy of what he just said, because I wished I could be as analytical and forceful and clear. So I'll be checking in with him later. So yeah, I think I'm one of the people that missed the boat on the fact that Silicon Valley at Home thing was actually a piece of correspondence. But I will take a note, and I will send alternative M in for the next round, for the next meeting, so I can get that front and center, just like Silicon Valley at Home. So I sent a letter in yesterday. I would just like to hit some of the salient points of it. I was totally bummed out to see the Silicon Valley get such high placement, their suggestion. I think we need to stay away from new office complexes serving out-of-town commuters and not our local community. As Arthur said, let's house people in offices. Let's not densify North Ventura. I mean, Silicon Valley at Home is saying 3,000 homes. Are you kidding me? That is like Manhattan. Why would we do that to Ventura, my neighborhood? Traffic jams from all these new office commuters at the world's worst intersection, El Camino and Page Mill. And we don't need more market rate or luxury priced housing. We need housing for the people that need it the most. I think people are not listening to me, as that old meme went, but over here, we really crave neighbors that would fit in really well with Ventura. And so bringing in North Ventura into the Ventura neighborhood. And, we have a slightly bifurcated up there. There's a whole section up there near Page Mill and El Camino. What if we connected all of Ventura with a beautiful community with lots of community amenities like the community center and park. So if we densify it, we'll be even further behind in our park allocation. And I mean, it's just going to be a real drag up there for all of Palo Alto, not just Ventura. So I really hope that you all will just give us 100% affordable housing as imagined in something like Alternative M. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate everyone's hard work. But seriously, let's move Ventura forward toward affordability and inclusivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Our next speaker is David Meyer.
Oh, am I unmuted? Okay, I'm unmuted. Hi, thanks everyone. Hi, my name is David Meyer. I work for Silicon Valley at Home, affordable housing advocacy organization that works across Santa Clara County. I hear in just some of these comments that there's been a little bit of confusion around what we had submitted our own analysis, and what we had submitted as part of the packet was our own work and wasn't what the city is recommending or endorsing. So just to clarify that, happy to answer questions people have about our own analysis or our thoughts. I know that Rachel would probably be happy to provide you with my contact information, or you can reach out directly. But really what I wanted to say tonight is I just wanted to thank the staff for pulling together that comprehensive list of different resources on affordable housing that were included in the packet, that were at the top of the packet. I think that there were a lot of different just great reads and resources in there covering topics related to affordable housing and kind of methods for actually building and making affordable housing a reality in a place, in a neighborhood like North Ventura. So I hope working group members were able to spend a little time reviewing and reading some of those resources. I think that they're all important things for you as you're considering the recommendations you want to make regarding how the city of Palo Alto could advance affordable housing in North Ventura. In terms of, I also just hope, I guess, that people were able to read our recommendations and can read them in our thoughts and analysis and view them as kind of our own. And again, we're really happy to provide additional thoughts and insights related to best practices that we see in our work across Santa Clara County in Palo Alto's neighbors on the peninsula and also kind of around the South Bay. And, I just say that I'm really looking forward to hearing from the expert speakers that you guys have today. I think that they're going to provide some great expertise to you related to their work in affordable housing. And I hope that they all provide insights that you can use as you continue your discussions around affordable housing in North Ventura. So thanks very much. Again, happy to answer questions. Can be reached through Rachel, and I hope you guys have a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Kevin Ma.
Hello, members of the handicap. My name is Kevin Ma, and I'm a renter in the Ventura neighborhood. For all this talk about traffic, we also need to recognize that the point of density, in a way, is the point of density, especially near the Caltrain station, is to encourage alternate views of transit. Like the fact it's next to a train station does matter quite a bit, especially that Caltrain is trying to make changes, hopefully once pandemic finances recover, to actually make trains go much quicker so that the station is actually more useful rather than just like the commuter train it is now. And that inherently density does also impacts how public transportation is actually designed, because public transportation doesn't really do so well in a not so dense area. As a person who lived in the suburbs of San Diego, that is very much the case. That we talk about this, like we're currently also in the major environmental crisis. We're currently in a heat wave that's literally causing power outages in our neighborhoods. That we do need to encourage alternate forms of transit. Cars are sure, but like parking is an inducive mechanism for people to purchase cars in the future, even if we are trying to move to EVs. And that we should also work with groups like the PABAC, like as Ken has mentioned in the emails, that is trying to design the future of bikeways in Palo Alto so people can actually use them rather than having incidents on El Camino Real. And density is very important because it's kind of the only way these things pencil out. Some people do want 100% affordability, but we shouldn't really focus on percentages per se, but more of like absolute units, because we know how expensive affordable units are, and the more we delay, the more we kind of screw future and present members of our society. And as such, I am encouraged by any kind of density mechanisms, though also to echo other people, Ventura should not be the brunt of all these changes. We should be encouraging such densification elsewhere. Churchill, Southgate, even the places that will fight against it, unfortunately. But I do hope for a future where the city isn't just lawyers, people who are lucky enough to get born here, and other people, or else we keep driving people out. Thank you.
Our last speaker, thank you. Our last speaker is Ken Joy.
Hi, thank you. I will be brief. I just want to say that I submitted written comments regarding the agenda today and want to call out that I appreciate the work the members of the working group have done to think about those who walk and bike through this part of town. That input would be very valuable when we next update our bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan. As Kevin alluded, I'm a member of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I welcome your input to that process of updating the BPTP. Thanks very much.
Hey, Ken, before you leave us, you helpfully sent me an email noting that I had given some unhelpful directions for people who are attendees on Zoom. Where did you find your raise your hand button? I want to make sure if there are any other speakers who need to know where that is, that they have knowledge of how to raise their hand.
At the bottom of my screen, I see raise hand, but I don't see a participant button. So that's the one difference.
Got it. Great. Thank you so much, Ken. So hopefully by going to the bottom of the screen, you saw the raise your hand button, since apparently that's right in your toolbar and you're able to raise it. So just one last call for any public comment before we move on to the next part of our agenda. Okay, not seeing any hands. I am going to kick it over to Angela just to see if Angela or Gail just have any few words they want to say as we get started. And then we'll kind of go into the meeting and the first part being focused on transportation. So just any opening words, Angela, for what you're hoping that well, I guess what we are all hoping we can achieve from tonight's conversation. Oh, you're on mute, Angela.
No, I just hope that we all have a chance to say what we think about the best ways to mitigate traffic problems and that could come up with a large increase of residents, and to talk about, I guess I'm particularly concerned about affordable housing and a variety of different ways to make that possible in the NVCAP. That it means a lot to me. Affordable housing and middle income housing, which I think is sometimes left by the wayside. So that's it. Thanks, and thank you, Gail, for coming up with the speakers for today. I'm looking forward to hearing them.
Great. And Gail, would you like to say anything? You're on mute before you begin.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking forward to this discussion tonight. We've addressed some of these issues in the past, and a premature thank you to all the panelists for participating. Also, I was very, very impressed by the quality of the packet, as one of the earlier speakers mentioned. The resources, the inclusiveness of it, a lot of the points that many of the members of the committee have raised were addressed, and the resources listed are fabulous. And thank you very much. I think the more we're informed and look at different ideas, the better. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gail and Angela. And again, hats off to Claire and Chitra, who do a lot of the work to make that packet look so good. So thank you. So I'm gonna share my screen real briefly so that we can make sure we're literally on the same page. If you do have your packet with you, I am looking at page 4 here, where it talks about our first topic, transportation, kind of gives us a format, a little bit different, but building on the formats we've used in the recent past. So first, we want to talk about the topic of measures to limit traffic increase. And this is, again, vehicular traffic increase. We're particularly obviously looking at the streets in our area, El Camino, Page Mill, Park Boulevard, and Lambert, as we accommodate future growth. How do we limit traffic? And of course, El Camino and Page Mill being major thoroughfares for our city, and El Camino really for the region. And then Park Boulevard and Lambert, very important neighborhood streets. So we're going to have the transportation staff, Sylvia and Joanna, are going to provide some insight into how they think about looking at ways to decrease traffic. And then we also want to talk about Park Boulevard improvements, one of our favorite streets to talk about. You know, what can we do to prioritize bikes and pedestrians on Park Boulevard and other streets? Which of the following methods do our working group members support for prioritizing bikes and pedestrians? We'll go around and we'll say kind of 1 minute each. I'm kind of like, okay, if you look at A through K, what are some of the ones that you favor the most? And I would invite Joanna and Sylvia also, if you want to refer to any of these items in terms of like, oh yeah, these are very effective, because they may also relate to decreasing traffic on streets. So feel free to use this or add to our list if we have things that we could have added. And then number 3, we'll look at site access and internal connectivity improvements. So possible points for traffic calming. This could be barriers, humps, roundabouts. There's all type of those measures we talk about that could be implemented. And then we have this map here that kind of shows some different points where we might implement things. This particular map was drawn kind of thinking, well, what if we put in a barrier like we have in other parts of the city that lets pedestrians and bicyclists through, but doesn't let cars through? Like, what would be the impact there? And we don't have to decide, but we can talk about, well, if we had a barrier here, well, one impact is that people on this part of Olive can't, you know, go south towards El Camino Real, right? They have to go to ECR a different direction. So talking it through things like that and how we approach it. So I am going to, with that, hand it back over to Sylvia and to Joanna. And Nikki, if you can let them know when they have about, 5 minutes left, and when they have 1 minute left, that'll be great, so we can stay in our 10 minutes. And again, Sylvia and Joanna, just really kind of how you think about ways to decrease traffic, what's been effective in Palo Alto, and if any of those traffic calming measures are particularly effective or particularly ineffective in these different contexts that we have in the NVCAP.
Thank you, Rachel. I think if I had the answer for how to decrease traffic in Palo Alto, you know, that would be amazing. So I just want to say that to answer this question in 10 minutes is really difficult, especially given the fact that we don't really know yet what this plan is going to, you know, we don't know what alternatives we're looking at really. And so, you know, traffic is really it's a regional issue. And there are different ways to look at transportation. You can look at it from a site, you know, at a neighborhood level, at a city level. It depends on what levels you're looking at. So I'm going to talk in general about 3 things that relate to traffic generation. And if this is not supposed to be like, this is not traffic 101 at all. These are just things that we are working on in the transportation department. And Joanna, feel free to step in if I forget something. But one of the things that you should know about as you're working on NVCAP is that state law has changed. And I know like Doria knows this because of PTC. State law has changed regarding environmental impact analysis of development and plans. And what that means in terms of, well, it's changed in terms of transportation analysis. So what that means, whereas before we used to say, oh, if you create a bunch of traffic at certain areas near certain intersections near your plan or near your project, you have an impact on the environment. And the state changed that. They changed it so that it now what they say is if you cause people who live or work at your new project to have to drive more then a certain level of driving, like then basically an average, like a county average or a regional average, then you have created an environmental impact. And so traffic is not so much the thing that the state, that CEQA is looking at now. And so really it has to do with what are the options available to the people. So if we're looking at this plan, this NVCAP area, NVCAP area, what are the ways that people will be allowed or encouraged to get around that don't increase driving? Like the EIR process now encourages planning in the direction that I think the NVCAP has been going, into a multimodal, creating a multimodal environment where walking and biking and taking transit is actually easy to do. So in the EIR process, the more that your planning allows for these other things to happen and less driving to happen, so more connections to transit, then the easier the plan gets through CEQA. So if it causes, and it's on a per capita basis generally is how this is figured out. So if you have housing and per capita person, people living in the housing units, if they are caused to drive more, then you have to do what we call TDM, transportation demand management. You have to do trip reduction programs to reduce the number of trips or try to reduce the miles. So that's the first thing that just recently happened as of July 1st. And because of where NVCAP is, because Caltrain is generally walkable to all of those things, you should be in a good place. We know that housing actually in Palo Alto has a low VMT score in general, and especially in this location, it's right by Stanford Research Park. So I think it's going to be okay. But I just wanted to let you know that that's the environment that we're in, the regulatory environment that we're in now. Another thing is that we are working on a sustainability and climate action plan in the city. And we will be looking towards trip reductions, things that reduce vehicle miles of travel. So I encourage any and all of you to get involved in that process, because that will also help to reduce what we do citywide to help reduce traffic is going to help NVCAP. We're also looking at a transportation demand management ordinance. We're going to be putting one forward in the fall winter timeframe. And that will have to do with aligning with the new CEQA rules and basically kind of helping new employers or new development in town, helping them reduce trips and reduce VMT, vehicle miles of travel. So so all of those things are kind of helping. It's kind of like the water we swim in. Sorry, is that 5 minutes or is that 10 minutes?
Yeah, just 5.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure I want to say much more than that. I mean, those are very big things that kind of will be part of the regulatory environment as we move forward.
Great. I think I missed somehow item 2 and 3. I got CEQA and VMT. What was the second?
The TDM ordinance.
Oh, TDM. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the third thing?
Oh, SCAP. Sorry.
SCAP. Sorry. Okay, great. I don't know if Joanna wanted to share anything, or if we want to move on to working group member questions.
Everyone, I just wanted to introduce myself. Since I want to say I'm relatively new, but not really. I've been here for about a year now. I'm Joanna. I'm the senior transportation planner. I just wanted to have a small chime in on Sylvia about VMT, and just to note that we are also still retaining level of service for local transportation analysis. So that's for a project that's not under CEQA. It's nice to meet you all.
Great. And for the TDM and SCAP, maybe in your last few minutes, can you talk a little bit about for TDM, let's say there's a new, like hypothetically, there's a new housing complex in the NVCAP that gets built. What kind of things might you imagine the TDM would apply to that building? Or if there's some new retail or something. Can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
So, so really the VMT or CEQA, so the TDM wouldn't come into play unless you had environmental impact, basically, or you needed to avoid an environmental impact. So you would want to get in there and like say, oh, we did the analysis and found out that this would generate excess VMT. For housing or retail generally, especially given where it's located, I don't imagine excessive VMT. Generally, housing, especially within walking distance of good transit, which NVCAP has because of the frequencies of the 22 on El Camino and because of the location near Caltrain. Housing near transit is treated very well. You generally won't generate that much VMT in general. Joanna, correct me if I'm wrong. Retail also tends to reduce VMT in the area. So certain kinds of retail, right? Maybe not huge retail, but neighborhood serving retail generally cuts VMT and shortens people's trips because they can get to someplace closer.
Maybe last question for that. If we flip the question a different way, instead of saying, what are some ways to reduce traffic? What are ways to get people on their bikes and walking better? What do you guys see that works in Palo Alto to help bikers and help people walk more?
So I think about the environment for walking and biking is composed of multiple, there are multiple elements that create that, right? So obviously you have to have great infrastructure. If you have very busy streets and no bike lanes, no bike facilities, it's unlikely some people will feel comfortable, but not everybody. The movement in the United States tends to be now more towards protected bicycle infrastructure. So kind of like what you see on Cal Ave and Middlefield, where we put in a two-way protected bikeway, or that little block off of the Homer Tunnel on Homer, right by the Homer Tunnel. That's a contraflow, but it's a protected bike lane. There's an actual physical barrier between the cars and the bikes. And a little bit the intersection at Middlefield and Embarcadero has some protected bicycle features there. It's not a fully protected fully protected intersection, but it's kind of close. So that tends to be what people are looking for. I mean, for pedestrian, we all kind of know what makes for what helps people walk more. It's wide sidewalks, trees, good street furniture, that kind of thing. But in general, if you want people to walk and bike more, you have to have, a certain amount of density that makes sense, destinations that make sense. I mean, it's all the good land use planning that I know you have all been working on from the beginning, when you identified the locations that you liked, that you wanted to bring those feelings, and ambiance to this neighborhood. NVCAP's got some good bones. And I think that, you're careful thinking about this is going to serve you well.
Great. So what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Claire. She's going to help moderate questions from the working group. We have time. Nikki, did we use up our 10 minutes? We may have saved a few minutes. I'm not sure.
No, we used the 10.
Okay. So we'll field some questions. So let us know when we have 5 minutes and then 1 minute and then 10 minutes when that's up, Nikki. So questions you guys have, and then Sylvia and Joanna are going to stay with us. They're just going to continue to be able to give their input as we kind of go through the other sections as well. So Claire, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So does anyone have any specific questions or comments they would like to share right now? Angela, you're on mute.
Thanks. Yes, so I'm really curious about the phrase excessive VMT, and I'm guessing that VMT is vehicle miles traveled. But what constitutes excessive? How do you count that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the city actually adopted that threshold for different kinds of land uses. So the way that the new CEQA works, and there's Joanna, maybe you can remind me in a minute, like what the dates are of the council meeting where we adopted VMT, so we can let everyone know. If you want to go look it up, you can read the staff report. It's fantastic. We got it's a very readable staff report. We got kudos for the staff report, so you can actually access it. But the way that this works is basically there's a threshold, and so if you're above a certain threshold of vehicle miles of traveled per capita, depending on your land use, so there's a threshold for housing, there's a threshold for employment, there's a threshold. Mostly housing, and then I think we have one for retail. Do we have one for I forget exactly, but anyway, so we have those thresholds. Those are based on what the state guidance was, which was you want to choose a threshold that's 15% below a current average. And so this is state guidance. So the state basically did a big analysis and said, we are not doing well regarding vehicle miles of travel and regarding the environment and driving. And so the state did analysis and said, as a state, we all need to reduce, new development needs to be reducing its vehicle miles of travel and its greenhouse gas emissions by 15%. And so then the way that translated into CEQA is that every city has to pick a threshold that is 15% below a regional or a county average.
So how does that, I mean, if you're going to increase the number of residents, how can you actually end up with a level of VMT that's lower than what it currently is?
Because that metric is per resident. It's a per capita metric.
Okay.
So the metric actually allows for intensification of land uses. And it really just looks at, how much are you asking people to drive? Like an individual person, And it turns out that housing in Palo Alto has a low VMT score because we are surrounded by a lot of employment. And employment in Palo Alto, not so much retail, but just employment like office, tends to have a large VMT effect. And that has to do with our jobs, housing, and balance. So the VMT metric really responds to what the existing land use context is.
Okay, great. So let's move on to our next person. It's Keith, has his hand up.
Thank you. So how's the trade-off when you do this analysis between bicycles and cars? So if you now make it less car friendly, but more bike friendly, are you looking at net miles traveled? And so this only is successful if you can offset the car trips by more bikers?
It's not so much offset. I mean, you don't get credit for having a lot of bikes. I think the bikes are not included. It's just about the cars. I think what you're talking about.
Well, if the bike traffic reduces car traffic, then that helps you.
Then you just look at the car traffic, right?
Yes.
So if you have less car traffic, then that's great. And it would be miles of travel. Right?
Okay, and so the only metric we're looking at is miles of car travel. See, one of the concerns I would have is that sometimes if you make a car go a little out of its way, you can make it considerably safer for the bicycles.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And so we're not getting any benefit if we make cars go an extra half mile, which is not a big deal for a car.
That is like noise in the model. So this actually has to do with like regional traffic in a way. It's if all of the car trips are if you're thinking about all the car trips happening just within NVCAP, that's not really what this is thinking. But thinking about, if someone lives in a housing unit, if someone lives in a housing unit, you know, and it takes into account, you know, all of their trips during, you know, all the trips that they might make. So it's the half mile here or there because NVCAP has decided to, you know, put, you know, change the routing of the streets or the direction of the streets or the whatever, the circulation. I wouldn't worry too much about that.
And so if we're talking about putting bollards here and there, that's the CEQA is not going to care one way or the other about that.
I mean, it'll take it into account, but I don't think I wouldn't worry about that, because if you are, like I said, if those bollards mean that, you know, someone who would otherwise drive to downtown, but then decides to take a bike every day to work in downtown, then that's great.
Yeah. My concern also is that if it's just miles traveled, you're not taking into account bike safety, which is an important important aspect.
Yeah, well, CEQA is really about environmental impact. You can still do bike safety, and that is great, but yeah.
But CEQA doesn't care. So CEQA is just looking.
It kind of does if you can show that your if your land use is not going to generate very many trips.
But CEQA is now just talking macro level decisions. These micro level decisions that we're making for NVCAP almost are irrelevant for CEQA.
Okay. I think that there is a relevancy, Keith. I think what we can be sure of is that if we find ways to make it more bike and ped friendly, they will have a limited to no impact on whether or not the VMT per capita of a housing project, for example, is increased. Because it's just because the threshold is really about that person's regional travel footprint, not just when they drive around the NVCAP. It's about that person's lifestyle of driving.
Right.
So I'm going to ask Claire to take us to our next two speakers because we're way over time. I know, Kirsten, you raised your hand. Joanna, we got to move on to the next topic. Sorry, we got other questions to deal with.
I just wanted to add if the guests are interested, the staff report it was adopted on June 15th.
Thank you.
Great. The next person that I have, so we have Terry, Doria, and Kirsten. So Terry, you're next.
Okay. This subject tonight, transportation, is a very difficult one because I believe we really don't have enough information. I feel frustrated tonight, very frustrated as a working group member here tonight. I think we should have had some knowledge or some information presented to us tonight about the impacts of adding a certain specific number of housing units. It could have been 400, it could have been 700, it could have been 1,000. And we don't have that information, and it's not being provided to us. And I think this is critical information for us to understand how will El Camino change? How will it impact Park Boulevard? How will it impact the other streets, Olive and the other residential streets around it? We're not getting that information. And like I said, I'm frustrated by that. I think impact.
We have 1 minute left on this.
Okay, but I would like to finish what I have to say. I think that's very important. I think things like Ross Road is a prime example of why sometimes things fail in the city, is because they are not listening. The city is not listening to changes and also hearing what the public has to say. And I think we need to do more of that, not less of it. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. So Doria and then Kirsten, you can make it quick if it's possible.
Thank you. So, and thank you, Rachel, for clarifying that the Silicon Valley information in the staff report was just another letter. I think a lot of the members of the public that we received, and I know I prepared comments based on that. So that was good to clarify that because I think it created confusion. And I understand that we have to follow the state law with regards to VMT, but I've just been thinking about VMT and the way it's generalized and the way the averages are created. And I'm just wondering if anybody knows if there is any data on VMT, like were there any cities or areas of cities that were early adopters, where there's any data that the average trips as calculated have any basis in reality. And so I was, because the state must have based it on something. Does anybody, maybe no one knows, but.
I'm not really sure. Are you asking whether or not the metric?
If it had been tested anywhere, or maybe if there was an early adopter of that method that made the state think it was a better way to do things.
Yeah, I think maybe like for the threshold, Sylvia, if there was some empirical evidence that, yep, a movie theater's travel footprint is this much VMT, and therefore the movie theater will cause this many trips. I'm just making that up as an example, but it was not just based in thoughts, but it's based in like reality that some movie theater was studied to say,
yeah,
trips or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, all of that, I mean, we've been using trip generation data from the Institute of Transportation Engineers for years. I mean, it's essentially kind of, it's based on that, but it's also based on the, you know, travel model that that VTA has worked on, that gives us these estimates for what, you know, what housing or employment, what the general trip length is, what the average trip length is. You know, for people who work in Palo Alto, there's an average trip length of you know, there's average amount of driving. So I mean, it's based on the model, but the model is also calibrated to reality. So
is it based on census data? The people
Yes, yeah. And every year or every other year we give, you know, it's based on census tract, like how many employees are in a census tract and how many residents are there, and it all gets updated, and VTA does this work every couple of years to keep it updated.
And to Rachel's example of a movie theater, I think a movie theater is kind of a fixed thing. Like, you know, the movie theater has X seats and they typically sell on weekdays or whatever. But it's troubling for me with residential projects because people change jobs frequently and people don't move where they live frequently, especially if they're owners in this area or if they have a really nice rental because of the expense of moving. And people's circumstances change it. So it just, I don't know. I was wondering if it had really, if any city or region or area had actually adopted it before it was imposed by the state to see how well it was working. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, there were several cities, several big cities that adopted early on and have been using it. I mean, it's really it's used by Oakland, San Jose. I mean, everyone has to use it now, but LA.
Maybe what we can do is maybe we can try to find a couple resources that we can put together and send that out. So we'll work with transportation staff to see if there's some examples that we can send out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question, Doria. So we're going to switch to our next part of our agenda. And so that is looking at question 2 under the transportation section. What can we do to prioritize bikes and pedestrians on Park Boulevard and other streets in the NBCAP? Which of the following methods do you support for prioritizing bikes and pedestrians on Park Boulevard? We're going to ask everybody to take 1 minute. And we're going to have Sylvia and Joanna wrap it up after we hear from everybody. You know, and if you are a member of the working group and you're like, I don't know what this is or how to evaluate, you might just consider saying which of these are your preferred methods. Or if there's some that you've experienced in real life that you're like, that did not work for me. It did not make me feel safer. So maybe think about the extremes, things you really like and like, yeah, we should do that, I think. Or things that you're like, I tried that, it did not work. You don't have to address every single A through K item. So, and an idea from one of our chairs was to ask those who live in the area to go first. I don't know if Yunin, you are one of our wonderful residents right there in the NBCAP area on one of the streets that we're trying to connect better. So, do you feel comfortable going first and sharing your 1 minute?
Sure.
Okay.
So first I want
one second, and we're still gonna have Nikki will come on screen and say 1 minute when your 1 minute is up. So just to let you know that we'll keep that time. So Yunin, you ready?
Sure. So
Great.
first, I want to echo where Terry said before, we don't have enough data, but all these options I have is based on my experience here. So I would think the priority is to make the bikers safe. I think currently the only traffic I see is the people try to drive cars from Park Boulevard to connect to the Page Mill. So in that place is a connection where the bike lanes and the drive lane, they are sharing the same lane when the drivers try to do a right turn. So for other ends of the Park Boulevard, I feel it's very comfortable for the bikers besides the connection with the Page Mill. And I don't really have an idea how to improve the safety at that connection. And for the proposed to make like Pepper, Oliver, Lombard, Portic one way. I talked to some residents here. None of them they like this idea. So I think that is not our. I think that's not our priority here to make the like Olive, Pepper one way.
Okay.
We just simply think they will not solve the problem. The other thing I think I like the idea is to add some reduced speed bumper on Park Boulevard. Yeah.
Got it. Great. Does anybody feel moved to go next? Doria, is that a hand or just your hand moving?
No.
Okay. All right, Kirsten, why don't you jump in?
So I biked a lot when my kids were in school, and I bike sometimes for transportation, not so much for recreation. So I think I think it's important that it's a multimodality street because our connectivity north-south is not that great in other things. So park is super important for pedestrians and bicyclists because the Fry's building kind of cuts, or the Fry's property, the 240 Portage property cuts the site in half. I agree with the tendency towards physically separated bicycle lanes and think that that's an amazing idea. Page Mill overpass is a pinch point, but as Yanan said, that turning area is really the most dangerous part of Park Boulevard. I'm open to the idea of having a bike boulevard along the Caltrain right-of-way because there's less conflict, but crossing conflicts. I think it's an excellent idea. And I actually have both biked and ridden on my bike, Ross, and I think the roundabouts work.
Okay, support of K and then some biking along the Caltrain. Great. Anybody want to go next? Okay, how about Keith?
There you go. I was muted. Yeah, I mean, the two big problems are Park Boulevard is a bike boulevard, which is not a very bike-friendly bike boulevard. And particularly when my kids were young and went through there, it got really scary. I mean, especially at that overpass, you have so many cars turning and the small kids are just so hard to see. So having something like D where you have no parking on Park Boulevard, that certainly would be helpful. And also greater protection, southbound bikes at the overpass would be helpful. But again, the bikes are going to be turning across your bike lane, so that still it doesn't solve anything. This is not an easy problem, and that's why I'm concerned also that just the volume of car traffic getting worse on Park would make matters worse. So those are my highest points. Cut through traffic is a neighborhood concern. I think making some one ways or some bollards might have some use, but you have to work with the neighborhood and see what they like.
Great, thanks, Keith. Why don't we go to Terry?
Okay, I looked at the list. I think I would pick A, G, and J.
Great. you want to say anything about what your experience with those has been, or what appeals to you about those ideas?
Well, the J one appeals because if you move the bike lane out of the traffic lane, if you move it over to the Caltrain station and along the edge of the Caltrain, it eliminates a lot of issues. And I think that reducing the street parking is an issue around California Avenue. That's where I live. So I know that's an essential thing for not only residents, but for businesses. So I think if you move the bike lane that direction, it would solve two problems.
Great. Thanks, Terry. Tim, would you like to share?
Caught me with something in my mouth.
Of course.
Eating dinner. Yeah, A, B, H, and I.
You support for those?
Yes. Minimizing curb cuts is good for both pedestrians and cars, or pedestrians and bikes. And I've seen it on many projects. I think that is definitely one that needs to be in the toolbox. Same with B. I think there was a comments earlier that trees and wide sidewalks is inviting. The policies that I understand in the city of Palo Alto, when you redevelop a project, will remove power poles and telephone poles and try to push things underground in the undergrounding district. So that should all be happening under B. H, definitely need more protection for cars as they go southbound, and then I, same. So pretty straightforward.
Great, thank you. Lund?
Thanks for putting me behind Tim this time. Made my job easier this time. So I pretty much agree. I think A and B for sure. I agree with what Tim said. Greater protection over Page Mill overpass. I would like to add though, I think if J were possible, it'd be great. I don't really logistically, that might be a challenge coordinating with Caltrain, but the idea of a bike path near Caltrain away from Park would be awesome. I don't know if it's realistic, but I think it's an interesting idea.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Doria, Alex, and then we'll go to our co-chairs to wrap up. Doria, what do you think?
Okay, at a high level, I envision Park Boulevard as a street with a much better bicycle and pedestrian experience by many of the improvements you've listed. Like Lund, I think that I cannot imagine the Caltrain giving away any part of their right of way, but if they would like to do that, that would be a creative idea. And I envision a Park Boulevard in the future that continues the pattern created at the north end by a mixed use that has a lot of housing with mixed use and or just housing projects, and taking the parking off of the parallel parking off of the street to have the space to have a real class whatever as we can achieve bike path there. And I feel like the bollards and the one-way streets and those kinds of things, I feel like I would need a lot more information about those, a lot more traffic information about those specific choices. But in general, not in favor of one-way streets. They create a lot of problems, and I don't think they're very preferred now in planning. I think that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Alex?
Sure. So I do use Park Boulevard every week. I think my preference is A, B, a partial on D. I'd like to see like some of the parking removed and maybe add some bulb outs. The city's been adding them, but they're not everywhere along the length of Park yet. And then also I do support I as well. I've seen some really awful things at that traffic light. And so I think I do support I. And that's it.
Thank you. We'll go to Gail, and then Angela, you'll have the last word. Angela or Gail, you're on mute if you're speaking. There you go.
Thank you. Got it. Okay. Basically, I like a lot of these. I don't think I'm in a position to prioritize. I would defer to the discussions and analysis through the bike and ped plan that was adopted by the city. I believe that the transportation staff and the consultants are very familiar with these and other items that will make a difference. I think for me, the priority is safety and protection of the pedestrian as well as protection of the bicyclist. Also, it depends on the ultimate configuration and site plans, the density, the uses throughout the site. Ultimately, that will provide kind of the framework for what kinds of improvements are needed along the way. And so we're operating a little bit in a vacuum here, but there are current conditions which should be addressed.
Great, thank you. Angela?
Yes, thanks. So I really like B, increase the size of the sidewalks and allow for bike lanes. And in order to do that, we would kind of need to do D, which is eliminate the street parking so that there's room for both bicyclists and wider sidewalks. I also, like Alex and Dory, I think said, or no, it was Tim, said they really liked I. I think changing the light on Park Boulevard to a three-way would really prevent the terrible backup that we have on Park Boulevard. I like D and E, but only if the local residents think it's going to help. Actually, I think I think E and F are good, but I think that the barriers are going to be more likely to reduce the traffic on Park, which is key. And I love J. I don't know if it would be possible.
Great,
I like all of them actually.
All of them with an honorable mention for those that you listed. So Sylvia, Joanne, I'm gonna put you in the spot. A few questions I have, and then you may just have some general thoughts. You know, one of our next questions is about the idea of E, reducing traffic with bollards and barriers. And there's many places throughout Palo Alto. I have to say I've been very impressed with Palo Alto's willingness to say this street, you can only go so far in your car, but if you're a bike or ped, you can walk right through. I think it's been great. So just how those come about, what are the things we should think about as pros and cons of those types of things? And maybe also K as another solution to slow traffic, but still let people go through. How have we seen roundabouts and or traffic circles be used? And, you know, are those in fashion or out of fashion in Palo Alto? And also speed humps, which seem to be simple, but maybe they're not very simple. You know, how do we decide to deploy those or not? And then of course, you can opine on anything, but I know those are things that stick out as things that we see in other parts of the city. So maybe they would be good here, but maybe there's a reason not to have them here. So we'll turn it over to you for a few minutes to comment.
Sure. How long do I have? I could talk about this forever.
Okay. Why don't you try to do 1 minute, like 90 seconds for each of those things? You know what I mean? And then we'll give you 5 minutes on the clock. How about that?
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, I mean, all of this stuff is all the juicy stuff that I love to do. So thank you. So regarding barriers, traffic diverters, where like we have on the Bryant Bicycle Boulevard, how do they come about? The council has to say that that's what they want, but they also require a traffic study and they require a certain amount of community engagement regarding, you know, will the community accept this kind of a thing? So you're all involved in the process. If you guys want to do that, that's great. We'll go to council. We'll do a traffic study will happen as part of the, as part of this process. So these are choices. These are all interesting street design tools that we can use. So that's that's the traffic diverter or a street closure, kind of a partial street closure that still lets bikes and pedestrians go through. you also asked about
roundabouts.
Roundabouts. So right, I mean, like we all know, Ross Road is a thing that we're still dealing with. That we still talk about in the transportation world here. Residents have very strong feelings one way or the other about it usually. So roundabouts, if you go to Stanford campus, they also have roundabouts. Those work really well there. Those are a different kind of roundabout. There's lots of different flavors of these things. Roundabouts can slow traffic down. They also are great at reducing conflict points. They have excellent collision records because there's a reduction in conflict points. And so roundabouts are a really, Caltrans is putting roundabouts in all over the place, and they are definitely in fashion across the country. They don't.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, they don't require lights, and they actually give you more throughput. More traffic can get through a roundabout in that same space than you could if you put in a four-way stop or a signal. So, or a four-way stop.
What's the difference between a roundabout and a traffic circle in transportation world? Are they actually different things?
They are different things. A roundabout has the islands, the splitter islands, and you have to yield. And traffic circles are like the one that we have all biked through at Bryant and Addison, where it's just a circle in the middle and you have to go around it. But the traffic control is actually done by stops. So it's just a circle in the middle of the street is a traffic circle.
And is one better than the other? Or they're just different? Or
they're just different. I mean, they both will generally slow traffic down because there's a thing in the street that drivers love to go straight, right? And so if you have to do a curve, then you have to generally slow down.
Okay, great. Do other folks have questions for our transportation staff about some of these topics like that? They're like, oh, hey, I mean, we heard a lot for A and B. That was a lot of support for those ones, also for D, or other questions that we want to have them opine on.
I just want to talk a little bit about the Park Boulevard overpass and where the green lane is, because I think folks were talking about that. When we put that green lane in, like the cyclists in town kind of jumped for joy. Many of us jumped for joy because we finally had a clear understanding of where bikes should be relative to all of that turning traffic. I understand that for many people, that is still a high stress location. I would love to put some protection around that bike lane, but because it's a bridge structure, we can't just go in and widen it, and that space is maxed out as it is currently striped. So we can't just widen, and in order to put something on the street like a vertical barrier, you actually have to have space, like buffer zone around it. So I can't just throw down some stuff, like it wouldn't work. So I just wanted to address that since that came up.
Great, that's a good point. I saw Kirsten had a hand.
Yeah. Post-occupancy Ross Road, it was very controversial when it came in. How does it work as far as the stats on traffic speeds? Because in some ways, I think the roundabouts are better than barriers because cars can go through. Yeah. They can go from one end to the other.
Yeah.
And the bicycles can go from one end to the other and be safe. So
yeah, so there's a learning curve around roundabouts. And I think that that is a lot, that is something that we have to appreciate. Not everybody knows how to use them. But if everyone yields to traffic that's in the circle and you go when it's clear and no one's coming at you, then you're safe through there. So the data that was collected along Ross Road showed, I'm talking about the bike boulevard in general, showed that there were more cyclists bicycling and average speeds went down because of all of the other infrastructure that we put in, including the roundabouts, the curviness. We added some curves. Like I said, drivers like to go straight. So when you add a couple curves, they have to pay attention. And some of the narrowing and some of the speed humps. So so the data was generally good. We will be changing the traffic control at the roundabout because of concerns about some collisions that happen there. And so that one at Ross and Meadow was approved by council to have two stops added to it.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other last questions before we move on to part 3? Just want to reflect back to our working group members, and Chitra is taking notes. I'm jotting some down as well, just for my own, she's typing them up. We had a lot of support for A and B. J was kind of felt like a dream, but you know, I think we like the idea of somehow having a separated area for our bikes that don't even have to interact with the cars at all. Would be wonderful. Also some support for J out there. Kind of some lukewarm support for the idea of one ways or completely obstructing traffic for the people who live there. And so thinking about maybe some of these roundabout solutions are ways that slow but don't stop or completely change the flow. So it's good to hear about that. Also, very popular. Thank you for that information about widening the bridge. Maybe it's something we can think about as a part of this long-term plan to help to do that. And of course, I think some folks for D, in order to, again, make that street really, really great for bikes. Okay, so we're going to go through this next section, and then after this section, we're going to take a break, and then we'll come to the housing section. We're at about 6:45 p.m. So the question 3 is possible points for traffic calming measures, such as barrier, humps, or roundabouts. The goal is to allow bikes and pedestrians and slow down automobile speed. The measures could be removable or permanent. So you can imagine you could have bollards that come up during festivals and certain times of day and block cars, or it could be, you know, permanent, which we see the separators at different parts of Palo Alto. City transportation staff, I want to ask you, we just kind of did the little talk about general traffic calming measures. So I think we kind of covered that, but if there's anything we didn't get to talk about, please let us know. And then focus discussions on barriers with some overlap. So we kind of grouped the barriers together in A, B, and C, D, E, and H, and E, F, G, H to kind of talk about different little areas together. And really, I think for Angela, which I don't think is this is wrong, she's thinking a lot about the barriers or the diverters, like maybe these are locations for that. But again, we just talked about speed humps, we talked about roundabouts, traffic circles, you know, a number of different measures. So maybe there's something else you see as a good place for here. So we want to talk about A, B, and C together. Then we'll talk about C, D, E, and H, and then E, H, F, and G because there's overlap. So again, we don't have to decide what's going where, but again, just to try to get a flavor for what we all are thinking. And I think the pattern we wanted to do was just to try to do 10 minutes for each of these discussions. So Nikki, if you can put 10 minutes on the clock, let us know when we get to 5, let us know when we get to 10. We'll start with A, B, and C. And so that's these ones here, Ash Street, Olive, and here at Park Boulevard and Olive. I guess I'll kick it over if anybody would like to start. You know, maybe you can either think what type of traffic intervention would I like to see here? It could be no intervention at all in order to beat things. Angela?
Oh, yeah. Only if you're ready. I do want to talk about A, B, and C when you're ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I do want to point out that A and B are on the eastbound side of Pepper and Olive, and they are there just to prevent those cut throughs that I know people do. If they're coming from, on El Camino towards Page Mill, they will very often try to avoid the backup by cutting through on Olive or on Pepper and then using Ash to get onto Page Mill. So putting a barrier at Pepper or Olive would prevent that. I really like those two. I put C in because Lakiba mentioned that she didn't like seeing people going down from Park, from Park to El Camino. And which I totally understand. And so C would prevent people, it's on the other side, the westbound side. And that would prevent people from coming from Park speeding down Olive towards El Camino. And I'm not as in love with it because it would be difficult for the residents on that part of Olive to get out of their homes in a way and to get into their homes. So I personally would not put C in, but I put that in there in case that appealed to the residents. I like A and B. And yeah.
And then I saw Sylvia raised her physical hand, and Doria, I see your digital hand. So Sylvia, did you want to make a comment? Sylvia with us?
Yeah. Sorry, thanks. I just wanted to mention that our current bike plan has a design toolkit. I think it's one of the appendices in it, and it lists all of the things that many of the things that we can use for traffic calming. So if anyone's interested in looking at specifically what the toolkit looks like, though there are more tools now. And the bike plan, I just wanted to make a plug. The bike plan is going to be updated, as was mentioned earlier. We're gonna do some work this year and more next year on that. So please participate in that.
Great, thank you. Doria.
So I was going to say that, so I served on the last traffic calming committee in College Terrace, which was, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. And it really takes a long time for a community to come to consensus about these things, because everybody has to have some sort of traffic calming device. It has to be in front of somebody's house. In my case, I have a traffic circle in front of my house, which was not particularly advantageous for me at all personally, but it worked well for the neighborhood. So I think when you're talking about doing this in the single family home area, you got to really talk to those people and let them decide what is going to be acceptable to them. I think that's really key. And I did want to say something about roundabouts, and maybe I'm wrong about this, Sylvia, and you'll correct me, but roundabouts and traffic circles. Roundabouts are really made to expedite traffic through an intersection, like they've installed it at Stanford recently, and they're typically bigger. And they also take away stoplights, which causes more greenhouse gas emissions, stopping and starting and stuff. Traffic circles are like what we have two of in College Terrace, and they are designed specifically to slow traffic, not to expedite it. And as Sylvia said, they do have signaled stop signs also, which roundabouts don't have. So they're kind of different. I don't think we want a roundabout anywhere in this area, but traffic circles are a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Great. I think I see Sylvia nodding.
I think there's a lot of, there's almost like, I think what Doria said is true. And I also think that people also just think about roundabouts as a bigger thing and traffic circles as a smaller thing. So there's kind of a lot of, there's some flexibility within the definitions, but I hear you. Thank you.
I think it's important, especially because sometimes folks like me who are not traffic folk, I think of them interchangeably, but I know they're not when I get in moments like this. And I'm like, oh yeah, they're actually different. Let me make sure I use the right term. Okay, I see Yunan, you have a hand. What do you think?
So can I speak first? Because I need to pick up my kids for, I'll be online, but I'll talk first. So
yeah,
sure. So I feel, I understand, and I kind of like the idea to put a barrier on A and B because to reduce the cut off traffic. I'm just wondering if we put a barrier here, why we don't put it at the intersection of El Camino Real and Pepper and Olive. So because so the people, when they want to cut traffic, if we have barrier at A and B, they have to U-turn and come back. I'm not sure which place is a better place. I'm just thinking. So if we put a barrier at A and B, should we also put a sign at the intersection at El Camino Real and both of streets? I'm not expert on the traffic, but maybe the Transportation and Traffic Committee, they have an idea which place is better.
That's a great suggestion. I'm not sure about the relationship between El Camino being a state road and if there are any requirements for people to have to be able to turn onto or off of it. So that's something we need to look at, but certainly interesting suggestion.
There are barriers like that in the neighborhood that's between California Avenue and Churchill.
Okay, well, that's a good sign then in terms of feasibility, I would say. So certainly something we could look at. Great. Other thoughts about A, B, or C as points for some type of intervention, whether it's, say, Keith, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, it reminds me when we did the very first exercise, we had to walk around the neighborhood and with the map. And when I was walking around Ash and Olive, there's just a steady flow of cars. It was a weekday, and everyone is running through that neighborhood. So my guess, I think the easiest thing would be is to make Ash a one-way, so you only can go southbound on Ash, and that would limit the cut-through traffic that's trying to avoid the light. But I agree with Doria. This is something that the neighborhood's going to have to deal with, but there's a lot of trade-offs.
So, and then your idea for Ash being one way would be to eliminate, if you can only go one direction, people are not going to try to go through the neighborhood to, well, I guess people only going south.
Yeah, it's only go south, and so the people from El Camino can't get to Page Mill. But you still, if you're a neighbor and you need to you always can go out on El Camino, go down to Page Mill and circle around. You can go clockwise on that loop, but you just can't go counterclockwise. And all the cut-through traffic is doing counterclockwise.
I see, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with Doria. These things, especially when we get to the point where we're talking about speed humps and things, there's like a hyper local part of the traffic planning. And so we would want to do some more outreach. So great suggestion. Other thoughts about A, B, or C before you look at some of the other points? I see some no's. Okay. And you can always come back to this, have thoughts later on. So then we look at Park Boulevard, C, D, E, and H. I want to point out E is where Portage comes through right now. So people can come up Portage and turn left or right. We've got a curb cut here into this rear parking lot behind the building formerly known as Fry's. We've got a point here at Olive, and then also Lambert connection. So again, points.
D is at Acacia. It's not at Portage. D is not at Portage.
E. D. Yeah, but E is at Portage. I'm saying this is behind the building that was that's Fry's. It goes behind here.
D is at Acacia.
Okay. Yeah. So thoughts about these points? What, if there's any particular intervention you favor or disfavor here? Angela?
Shall I go first again? Okay. So I see Acacia and Portage as the two different ways, that's D and E, to get into the 340 Portage site. And because I have this vision of a nice non-car focused park next to the creek, I prefer to have access to 340 Portage from Acacia. So I like the idea of having no barrier at D on Acacia and having a barrier at E on Portage. I just prefer the idea of using that parking lot as a way into the 340 Portage site rather than inviting cars through the park. That's my thought.
Great, others?
And we have 1 more minute.
Great, thanks. Well, we just started this topic. This is a new 10 minutes.
Okay.
So, can I go?
Yep. Sorry,
Okay.
I have a hard time seeing everybody. I got a lot of stuff on my screen, so.
So, the light to get out of our neighborhood is at Portage. So I'm torn because I can see Angela's point about wanting access to be down D, down that Acacia Road. It also fits with what I read in the weekly about this, Tim Steele mentioning that the parking structure might be behind Fry's if he gets approval to have the mini Target there. So that would be on Acacia, basically parking on Acacia. So that is a vote for, say, yes, don't have a barrier at Acacia, let Acacia flow freely. However, when you're getting out of the neighborhood, it's really hard to go south on El Camino unless you're coming out at a light. And so our choice in that area is the light at Portage. I doubt that we can get that light moved because it's a state highway. So then we're stuck with how do you get people from Acacia to the light if they want to go out and go south?
So that could go to some other questions we could talk about in terms of other types of interventions too. I think there are, I may be confusing the part of Park Boulevard closer to Cal Ave where there are some speed humps. Do those seem to be effective? Do people try to avoid streets if they know they have speed humps on them? We want to get some other traffic interventions at those points or nearby to those points. Tim, you don't have to speak, but I know your property was invoked and your parking structure, you were quoted by Kirsten a little bit. If you want to respond, you can to some of your thoughts or others have thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Kristen, you were partially right on my quote. I'm not sure if the article was right or not, but the way the building functions now is the parking that serves it is split approximately 50% on both sides. And that's why you see D and E having curb cuts. You also have it, the parking lot being accessed from El Camino on Portage and El Camino off of Acacia, because there's parking essentially on both sides. We had suggested at one time that the parking lot on the creek side could potentially be developed as residential if you replace the parking in a parking structure on the other side, the D side, if you will, of the building. However, if you put residential there and you put a parking structure on the other side, it's highly unlikely that it would be supportive of any retail because of the visibility, lack of access, and lack of visible parking in a mid-block configuration. I think it would just kill it. So there's kind of a point that if you're going to keep the building and you're going to want to develop some housing or park or both, you're going to have to replace that with parking on the other side in a structure. The structure doesn't have to be any more than one level to get to the same, because essentially you would double it by putting one deck on it. So that would keep the structure pretty low and unimposing relative to that. And you could put some frontage building on that, a retail or a community building or something along the park frontage to mask the structure, but it would not be imposing. That's kind of a potential phase of how that building and that traffic and stuff could move through there. And just to add one more thing is, if that were to move in that direction and you did residential development along the creek side, I could see that the space between that now that serves as the Portage extension through our current parking lot could be discouraging of through traffic with various things and be encouraging for bike and pedestrian transportation with minimal access for cars to the residential that is there. So hopefully that was a lot in 1 minute.
That was really efficient. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if people have questions about that, we can ask those too. Other thoughts or questions or even just musings people may have, again, what interventions may work at these points or not work at these points that you think would be ineffective? Okay. Keith.
Yeah, again, back to my whole point about Park Boulevard being so busy with cars. I don't think I want any more cars on that from a bike safety standpoint. So my inclination would make C, D, and E all barricades that cars cannot go through and route all the traffic up to El Camino.
Thanks, Nicole. Great, so have some barriers there. Okay. Yeah, I think it is kind of, I think Kirsten kind of helped tease out some of the points of trade-off, which is, I think we heard Lakiba last time say, folks will come down here and come around to Portage to get out at the stoplight, which stoplights are very expensive. So, and because it's a state road, putting a signal in isn't just something we can decide locally. So how to make sure folks can still have access to being able to come down and then go south was a concern. I see you, Angela, just 1 second. So that was a thing. And so I don't know if we could do all of these as barriers, but again, are there different interventions that could make it so it's not a faster way to get through the neighborhood? Angela?
Okay, so I just want to point out that there is a little road that goes from Acacia to Portage, just to the west of Global Playground. And that could be used, I suppose, to get to the southbound light, if that's what was necessary, in order to somehow protect Portage through traffic, if that's the choice that people want to make. And it would also slow traffic down to have to make those turns. So
you want a homeowner to drive from Olive, come up here, come down Acacia, and come down here?
Oh, no. You mean to go south?
Yeah, for turning left.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. If the homeowner was on Olive and they wanted to turn left, how do they do it now?
There's a light at Portage, I believe, that they use.
And so they do go up to Park and then over to Portage and then down. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So they already go up to Park anyway. So yeah, I don't think it would be a huge difference, but I would leave that up to I do think that the people who live there need to have the first say.
Yeah, I think as Doria and Keith wisely cautioned, after many years of working in community settings like this, we got to have some more direct contact too with folks who live there. So I see Gail and then Doria, and then we'll, I think, probably move on to the next question. Gail?
Yes, thank you. I agree with many of the points that are made. Again, I believe the transportation staff and the consultants can come up with good suggestions. It will depend on the land uses and intensity. My question is, when I'm looking at the screen right now, I think Rachel or Chitra, you're in charge of what's up here. Mm-hmm. I can only read down through the second line, barriers A, B, C are recommended. Is there a way to kind of reorient? Oh, okay.
I can only scroll down or scroll up though. I can't show you this and show you the map.
Okay, I was trying to scroll down and I couldn't. Now it's better. Thank you.
Okay. Doria?
So I was going to say that I think it's hard to make a lot of these decisions before we know what the needs are going to be with regards to land use. But one thing I was thinking about is for bicyclists, especially coming south on Park and then wanting to go across El Camino, there isn't a very easy way to do that in some sense to get to the research park.
Yeah.
But there might be some kind of different signalization that we want in the area on El Camino. I have no idea what it would be, but I think we should think about that.
I saw Sylvia nodding. I think.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Doria. The issue with getting. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The issue with getting, currently the issue with access for bikes between Park and El Camino is not so much signalization, it's that there is no real route. There's not like a real way to do it that is safe. And I say that as the wife of someone who used to commute by bike through here every day. So I am well aware of this problem. And so, yeah, I'm, hopefully there will be a way to safely get people from Park to El Camino to Hanson, for example. We can work with Caltrans to fix that Hanson Portage dogleg, potentially. So that's something that we may have some grant funds to fix. But that's a separate project, but that's, that is something that we can look at.
Yeah, it's even very scary to cross El Camino as a pedestrian, right at the dogleg area. So
yeah,
it's outside of this project. I just thought I'd mention.
Yeah.
See a lot of vigorous nodding. We're all like, yes, it is. So clearly something that we can tee up through our work. Okay, so I'm going to give us a 5-minute break, so you can use the restroom or get a glass of water, whatever you need. And when we come back, we're going to move into the housing portion of our meeting. Thank you in advance to our speakers. So if you can come back at 7:13, that would be great. Angela? I can't hear you.
Did we talk about G&H and I just missed it because I was talking with my husband, or?
We did not. I'm sorry, I missed those. Well, let's
That's
take our
okay.
break and come back. We can maybe try to squeeze those in.
We'll talk about G&H when we come back. Okay.
How do,
Get out of here.
no, how do I, let me see, I clicked on here.
Oh, no, you don't. What do you want?
Well, how do I get my picture to show?
Oh, you'll be right. Oh, I'm not muted.
When folks are back, if you can come on video if you are on video, or raise your hand if you are not on video, just so we know you're here. That way we know when we can get started again. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, London Yun. think we are all here. So I mistakenly advanced skipping F and G. I just want to do a few minutes, a comment on those before we do our guest speakers. I don't want to take too much time away from them. If folks have comments about F or G, especially in relation to E and H, again, whether there's any type of intervention that you'd like to see here, if you have something you'd like to see at those places or to have them not have any intervention, just come off mute and share what your thoughts are there.
Okay, I'm going to go first again, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I like the idea that many people have had of having a bicycle connection from Bulware Park over to 340 Portage, and that would be safest if we have a barrier at G. I was also told that if we stop the cut throughs on Olive and Pepper, then people will start using Lambert. And so G, the barrier at G, which is only on the eastbound side, would also stop people from using it as a cut through, as well as being safer for bicyclists. I don't like H as much. It just seems like it would cut off the residents from reaching Park that way. And it's a few residents, and I think that we should allow them to reach Park. But I like G.
Other responses to Angela or thoughts about these locations?
I'll comment. I think Angela has some good ideas there. My only concern is that if you block that off, you'll be making Park a lot safer, which I like. But I'm worried now, like Fernando, would Fernando now get the brunt? Will people, will the cut through traffic just move? But
just keep moving down.
yeah, but that's something that you can study and try and figure that out. I don't think necessarily I have the answers right now, but I think that that has potential for, if you block off Lambert, that would make Park Boulevard a lot less traffic.
I see Sylvia nodding to when you said study it and kind of figure out what that domino effect would be. And we can kind of maybe figure that out a little bit.
Needs a study.
Got it. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Gail Price to introduce our three guest speakers that we have today. And we are going to have them each share, so I'm going to go to where we talked about it, each of them to share a bit with us. Where is that part of it? Well, anyhow, we'll have each of our guest speakers share a little bit with us. And then, sorry, I'm starting wrong. What we were supposed to do is have each of us share our affordable housing goal, but I'm thinking I want to get time for our speakers. And I think sometimes hearing from people can jog your mind too. So why don't we go to our speakers and then we will come back and have each of us share what kind of our affordable housing goals are. And I think I thought we had some more for our talk, but sorry, I'm giving you guys all like vertigo by scrolling up and down this so quickly. And then we'll talk about, really how do we get housing for a range of incomes. So, and I apologize to our speakers. Did we give you 5 minutes or 10 minutes? I cannot recall what we asked for. If Chitra or Claire remember.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. So Gail, why don't you go ahead and introduce, and then of course we'll have Nicole to keep time for us. And then we'll have each working group member be ready to share what your goals are for affordable housing after our speakers conclude, and then we'll have question and answer time. Gail?
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to our three panelists who will be discussing affordable housing. They will be in the following order: John White, Chief Real Estate Officer of Ode Services, Allied Housing, Housing for Independent People, and Community Working Group from Fremont, California. John oversees all development projects and is project manager from conception through construction and leasing. He brings astute knowledge of the real estate market and affordable housing. He is very effective at site acquisition, securing government approvals, securing capital and subsidy funding, and managing construction or renovation. The next speaker will be Lisa Ratner. She's a member of the Palo Alto League of Women Voters, its advocacy chair, and member of the Housing and Transportation Committee. She is also a board member of Alta Housing, which was formerly Palo Alto Housing. Lisa is a professional attorney and longtime Palo Alto resident. She will also make introductory remarks to the next speaker, who is David Thompson. He's president of the Twin Pine Cooperative Foundation and co-principal of Neighborhood Partners, LLC. So again, welcome. And why don't we start with John White?
Good evening, everyone. I thank you, Gail, for the introduction. I am speaking from my RV in my backyard in East Palo Alto, where I live. I'll start a little bit with Abode Services. I don't have a lot of time, so Abode Services is the largest homeless services and housing provider in the Bay Area. And we currently own and operate the Opportunity Center in Palo Alto by Town and Country that you guys are probably familiar with. Abode Services focuses on creating permanent supportive housing and housing for extremely low income residents. You know, this housing is for the most vulnerable in our communities, and many of our participants experiencing homelessness actually have one or even two jobs, but still can't afford housing. So just as a little kind of reality check of what some of these terms mean, extremely low income is 30% of the area median income. You know, Palo Alto currently has a minimum wage of $15 an hour, which is well above the federal limit. But for a person working a $15 an hour job, such as a restaurant, landscaping person, service person, or retail clerk, all of those people are still extremely low income, and actually less than extremely low income. You move up to $20 an hour, that's $41,000 a year. You know, truck driver, warehouse workers, those are very low income. $25 an hour, office administration, healthcare assistants, those are still very low income. You know, and the average rent in Palo Alto for a one-bedroom apartment is $2,500 a month. So if, you know, that's, if you calculate that out times 12, that's $30,000 a year. So that is pretty hard for somebody who is making $31,000 a year at minimum wage, you know, in at one of these many jobs that are all around us. So one of the things that Abode really focuses on providing housing for extremely low income and people that have disabilities that need permanent supportive housing. That's housing that comes with operating support in the form of a rent subsidy or operating subsidy, as well as social service support to help the residents to improve their employment, get better education, do life skills, cooking classes, financial planning, all kinds of things that will kind of help people to really thrive in their housing. The way that we do our projects is through the low income housing tax credit program. Many of you have probably heard of it. It's actually the largest source of affordable housing funding in the country, approximately value of about $10 billion a year. And since it was created in 1986, it has created over 2 million affordable housing units in this country. So the short version of the low-income housing tax credit program is that it uses corporate investments, usually a bank or an investment firm, to produce capital to build the building on the front end in exchange for tax credits over the course of the next 10 years. And so it's actually a good public-private partnership where the government has kind of turned over the goal of affordable housing to corporations to provide capital and get the benefits in terms of tax credits. You know, the advantage of using the low-income housing tax credit system is that it reduces the cost of affordable housing on the local community to generally around somewhere about $100,000 per unit. Whereas the actual housing in Palo Alto probably costs $700,000 plus per unit. You know, so it leverages local dollars extremely well. in terms of an affordable housing solution. It is complicated and it does take a long time. There is some state legislation with by right and with different funding that has certainly helped the process and is reducing the time and money it takes to build affordable housing. But one of the local sources that provides the local contribution to this type of project, it often comes from in lieu fees from market rate housing developments. But I will say that, in my opinion, the absolute best source of local money is from a commercial linkage fee. Creating jobs has a direct and obvious effect on the need for housing. But it's even more than what you might suspect as a 1-for-1 ratio. You produce one job, you need one new home. For example, for every software engineer, it takes 5 other low-wage workers to support that person. Food service, janitorial, landscaping, supply chain, security, maintenance. So it actually, one high-paying tech job actually creates the need for additional affordable housing because all of these other people require a place to live too. And so, but, because of our desire to have, companies like Apple and Google and Facebook in our communities, we have, created way more jobs than housing. In fact, since the Great Recession, just in 2010, the Bay Area has added 722,000 jobs, but has only constructed 106,000 housing units. So what is the result? Massive housing shortage with very expensive housing and transportation nightmares like you guys were just talking about, with everybody cutting through neighborhoods trying to commute into the job centers. Palo Alto has one of the highest jobs to homes ratio in the whole Bay Area and even in California. And so this is a huge problem. Governor Newsom made this his campaign platform. 3.5 million homes need to be built in the next decade, according to Governor Newsom. And, we also have regional housing needs that kind of take that 3.5 million and allocate it into different areas. The Bay Area needs 441,000 homes created in the next 8 years. Of that, 114,000 are needed for very low income people. This is a regional housing needs assessment that is a requirement for all cities to have in their housing elements. And so for Palo Alto, the regional housing needs assessment for low income housing, very low and low income housing, is 1,123 units. This last RHNA cycle of 8 years, Palo Alto produced 13% of the housing that is required for very low and low income housing. So, the need for housing is immense, and the solutions that you need for different types of housing are very different. Inclusionary housing for rental is an effective strategy for having the housing built with market rate housing, as 15-20% of the units being, affordable to maybe 80 or 100% AMI residents for rental. It's not a great solution for homeownership because the units are very expensive and there's no leverage. And so if the unit costs, $700,000 to build, and the homeowner that's going in there can only afford a $300,000 mortgage, that's like a $400,000 subsidy by the city. The low-income housing tax credit program is $100,000 subsidy per unit. And so, it's a much better leveraging of outside funds to use a low-income housing tax credit program than simply doing inclusionary. The low-income housing tax credit program only goes up to 60% of the area median income for AMI. So it doesn't get you all the way up. It's really designed for the very low and extremely low income units. And that's where we focus. Our development agency really focuses on only doing tax credit projects for extremely low and permanent supportive housing, who may even be at like 15% AMI, making $15,000 or $20,000 a year from disability insurance or, a part-time job or something, in addition to the extremely low income folks who may be working full-time and still be extremely low income. I think that it is necessary to build housing at all levels, market rate housing, moderate housing, low income housing, and extremely low income housing. But to just to do a little bit of a reality check, the people that are at the missing middle, the people that are in the moderate income range that can't afford to buy a home because it's too expensive and are rent burdened, it is problematic for them, but they'll probably survive. Their life won't be as pleasant. They may have to drive farther. They may have to, maybe even have multiple families in an apartment or something, but they'll probably survive. The people at the bottom, the extremely low income, the people with disabilities, those are folks that don't have access to clean water or soap or personal protective equipment or social distancing. And currently in this crisis with COVID, many of these folks are at risk of dying. And so, excluding them because they're difficult to develop, I think is not something that we want to forget, that these folks are part of the group that needs housing too. And so, I think that I would advocate for, as you're looking at affordable housing solutions, if you want affordable housing at all levels, make sure that you are actually hitting the lowest level of affordable housing that's needed, and not just focusing on the missing middle or the moderate housing. Those are needs. There is a housing shortage at all levels, but the people at the bottom really suffer the most, and they are the most vulnerable in our communities. So I very much look forward to hearing from David in particular about his co-op model later on. So I will stop now and wait for questions. Thank you for letting me present.
Thank you, David. I think we're going to hear from Lisa Ratner next. Lisa?
Hi, thanks for inviting me. I grew up here in Palo Alto. My family moved to Palo Alto and bought a house in 1958 when a moderate income family could buy a house or rent an apartment here. And today, a similar moderate income family moving to Palo Alto cannot do that. So what can we do about this? I became aware of limited equity co-ops a few years ago when I visited my mother's childhood home, the Amalgamated Apartments, which were the first middle income limited equity housing cooperative in the nation. This Tudor style, lushly landscaped community opened in 1927 in the Bronx for 300 working families fleeing crowded tenements. To address the severe housing shortage after World War I, New York State had encouraged the development of housing cooperatives by offering property tax abatements. And the Amalgamated was the first to take advantage of that new law. Later on, our family moved in with my grandparents into the Amalgamated for a few years. I was an infant and have no memory of this, but eventually my parents bought a house in Long Island and we moved there. Today, nearly 100 years after its founding, the Amalgamated is thriving with 1,300 households in a mixed income community from very low to above moderate income. I wondered if this limited equity model could be used in Palo Alto to house working families similarly shut out of the market rate housing. When I came back to California, my research on housing cooperatives led me to David Thompson's articles on Dos Pinos, a housing cooperative in Davis, built by David in 1985. Dos Pinos seemed to duplicate the Amalgamated's long-term stability and affordability, helping families save through lower costs, creating economic upward mobility. I suggested that this forum tonight invite David because he has unmatched experience in the field of cooperatives, having organized Dos Pinos and worked most of his life creating cooperatives and nonprofit affordable housing. He was inducted into the Cooperative Hall of Fame in 2010, and I'm honored to introduce you to him right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. David, you're on mute if you want to
Unmute myself here. Right.
Perfect.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you, Lisa, for that wonderful introduction. I appreciated learning about this project and talking with you. And thank you, John, for your remarks. In my professional life, I do tax credit low-income housing, and so I'm very familiar with all of the issues that you have raised. And of course, it is the population that is the most underserved. And finding a way to house folks like that are really critical. I'm going to talk about the limited equity co-op, but I'm just going to say co-op because it just gets long saying that every time. So I'm just going to use the word co-op. But in a co-op under California law, and yes, indeed, Lisa, we sort of borrowed the New York version when we created the California law in 1979. And what it means is that it is one mortgage across the entire project. Members have a share in that cooperative. That share is not supposed to be any more than 10% of the development cost of the project. So John, I think you had said earlier, perhaps 700,000 or 800,000 per project. So the maximum share that a person could buy in a co-op in Palo Alto at that price would be $70,000 or $80,000. That's the max. The shareholders all have one vote in the organization and the election of the board and the bylaws and things like that. And the profits, if any, are distributed by the format for not increasing the rent. So that on an annual basis, the cooperative looks at its costs and just adds more to the carrying charges that are real versus those that are in the marketplace. And you'll see that in some of the materials that we have. And one of the questions that I'm having here is, I had a couple of charts that I had sent, but I don't see where they are. Is anybody there?
Yeah, if you can say the chart that you want to bring up, if you have the title of it, we can bring that up.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I don't need it yet. Anyhow, I was the one of the creators of the National Cooperative Bank in the late 70s. Then I became the regional director for the Western states. And we did around about 13 to 15 of these co-ops in California at the time. And one of them is Heron Court, which is in Redwood City. It's a 102 unit limited equity co-op that's right there near you. But one of the ones that we funded is in the town where I live, which is Davis, California. And that is Dos Pinos. And I became very interested from the very beginning in measuring how Dos Pinos would work versus the marketplace, versus other rentals, and the median income that was needed. So for 35 years, I have been measuring Dos Pinos, a 3-bedroom unit there, versus Sequoia, which is an apartment building across the road built a year before. And then against the UC Davis has an annual survey of all market rate rentals in Davis, and that's been going on since 1983. So I would use that as a third, then I would use Yolo County median income. So we have probably one of the best sets of measurements of how this cooperative would work. I have quite often written about all of that, and I think that there's a Shelter Force article that's a part of the package available to people. You can go and look at that. I wrote that about 3 years ago, and that's a follow-up to many others. And then this year, I supervised an honors student at UC Davis in the regional planning, Michaela Fenton. And she brought all of my statistics up to date. And then we compared it with other affordable home ownership programs in Davis so that we could see how it did against one project, which is a form of a land trust, another one, which is a limited resale condo, and then there's a limited resale single family program that the city of Davis operates. So you can take a look at those, and I'll be happy to take questions or any other queries that come later. So try to make that
Could we get those up, or is that one of the charts?
no, it's not.
Oh.
No. But you can put up chart number, let's say chart number 2.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that mean you don't get to see me, or how does this work?
It depends how they're how they've set up their screen. Just one
Right.
second.
Oh, say so. I'll carry on here. So on. So for family of 4, and we're using that family of 4 at 100% of median income. We're using a 3-bedroom department, no matter whether it's a home or a condo or the, you've got the chart there in front of you. So Southfield Park is a limited resale condo. The Davis Affordable Ownership Housing Program are single family homes, which are limited resale. Aggie Village is a land trust model because the land is owned by the university and the individuals living there have to be from the university community, mainly faculty, but also some staff. There's about 56 of those units. And Dos Pinos is the limited equity housing cooperative, which was built without any subsidy at all in 1985. So the chart that I'm showing here, and I'm going to, so the right column is the critical column. In 2019, when we measured Dos Pinos against the average 3-bedroom market rate rental in Davis, and we have 3 of those apartment buildings across the road from Dos Pinos. If we picked up a family living in the rentals, the market rate rentals, and move them over to Dos Pinos and put them in a 3-bedroom unit there, they would have savings, real, honest, true dollars, savings of $18,000 plus a year by moving them over there. That I'm using to show you that over time, a limited equity housing cooperative becomes more affordable to the population. And what this chart shows is if you were living in the land trust model, then you have 13,000 savings. If you're in the affordable housing, you have about 10,000. And if you're in the limited resale condo, you have $2,000. So I think you could now put up the other, is it number 2? I think. Yeah. All right, I'll wait for that to happen. The thought that I'd had about the Portage Bay site. And okay, so here's that chart. And this shows you the level of affordability over time, the one with the graph.
Sorry, just one second.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the one I'd like to
try to
put up.
re-share it. Right, we're going to number 2.
Please. There you go. So this was a way of measuring the different affordable ownership models in Davis, because many cities do try to create an affordable ownership model. I personally don't think many of them really work very well. I think that they are a costly misuse of land in my perspective. But we all have the American dream, or we used to have more of a dream than we do today. But this is to show you the Aggie Village. What happened in the blue is the base year. So when it began, it required about 100% of median income to be able to live there. And because it's a land trust model,
You
and
have
has
1 more minute on this topic.
gone lower. Is that okay? Is there somebody else want to ask?
We just have about 1 minute left.
Yeah, okay. So those are the examples of what happens in each of the model. But if you go to the last three, you will see that in 1995, when the Dos Pinos started, it required 110% of median income to live there. But by 2019, it had dropped to 55%. And whereas, and this is also very true of Palo Alto, although your numbers are different, 82% of median income, you could get into the 3-bedroomed average apartment, but in 2019, you need 124%. So anyhow, one of the thoughts I'd had is, and right behind me on my left here, that is a new housing co-op in Toronto that was sponsored by the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union, and 25% of the people living there come from the hotel and restaurant industry, 25% come from low income, and 25% come from people that were displaced by the development that's gone on in downtown Toronto. And then on my right-hand side there is a picture of Dos Pinos, which is here in Davis. So I will stop for the moment, and I know that we can have some discussion and go from there.
Great. So we'll have some questions for our speakers, and I'm going to cheat and ask David a question. If you can compare to the work that, let's say, John White does in terms of, affordable housing, folks are getting sources and uses from all types of places. How do you afford the development costs of the co-op? Who are you getting the capital to build those types of co-ops these days?
Okay, good question. How we have normally done it in California is because of the requirement of inclusionary zoning, and for example, in Davis, part of the land that new development has to set aside is for moderate income housing. And so that's how we got the Davis project. That developer wanted to move ahead of everybody else, offered to give the land, actually sell the land to the co-op, but do all of that. We have difficulties in getting financing because we are not eligible for the tax credit program, because we are an ownership program and we are not focused on very low income and low income, which qualifies you for the tax credit program. However, HUD has an FHA program for co-ops. It's a 40-year mortgage. It's available now at about 3%. It's a mortgage that includes a construction loan at 3%. And so that is how limited equity co-ops are being built in the United States today. We're eligible for some of the funds that the state has and the city has and places like that. So we usually cobble together 5 or 6 different sources of funding. There is the National Cooperative Bank, which I helped to found, which is also doing the long-term funding.
Great. All right, working group members, it's 7:47. So I want to try to have 10 or 15 minutes of questions. Then we're going to go and hear from each of you what your goals for affordable housing are. So Kirsten, I see your hand. And again, you can raise your digital hand or a real hand. I'll try to get to everybody. Kirsten, and then we'll go to Gail.
It's just a quick question. If someone is purchasing into this and they no longer want to live in Davis, what happens to their unit?
They notify the board of directors that they wish to leave the co-op. In the case of Dos Pinos, you can give a 60-day notice, and after 60 days, you will get your share back, and that unit will no longer be yours, and you will be no longer responsible for it. The share is then allowed under California law to grow by 3 or 4% per year. It can be up to 10%, but most cooperatives put it at 3 or 4% so that it stays affordable. And you get your money and you get that increase when you leave. And the next person coming in buys the share at the higher price.
Great. Gail?
Yes, thank you very much. My question is, what are the biggest obstacles to creating more limited equity housing models in California, and what should be done about it?
Well, BC, I'll answer your second one by saying pray. And that's about as good as it can get. The dilemma is you can't buy land in California at market rate, build it at market rate, and then have those costs be affordable to anybody under about 180% of median income. It's just not possible. So the only way that limited equity co-ops get built is, in this particular case, let us say, where the shopping center is taken over. Part of the shopping center is used for low-income housing, such as John is proposing. Part of it is then for market rate housing, so you have some gift of profitability there. And then what we would suggest is that the land that's available for the limited equity co-op be long-term leased to the co-op, because it doesn't matter to the members. They don't ever need to own that land. Their tax deductions are associated with the built property and not the land.
Okay, thank you. And I saw John nodding to that when you said it's impossible to buy land at market cost, build at market cost, and provide affordable housing. John, when you think about that challenge that you're trying to meet with abode services every day, what are some of the biggest kind of barriers or challenges besides just the cost itself in the market, which we can't unfortunately do anything about, when you try to move the needle to make your projects cheaper or more affordable, or work with cities to make the projects work better? Like, what are some of the tools that we could apply, for example, in our NBCAP area to make it easier to build affordable housing?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. That's a great question. So, I mean, if like what David said, I mean, if we're buying property at market rate and building, to the same building code everybody else does, and complying with the same planning requirements that everybody else does, our buildings are going to be about the same cost as market rate housing, and there's just no way to pay that rate with a regular bank mortgage and be able to make it affordable for either rental or for home ownership, because like you said, it takes 180 to 200% of area median income to be able to afford something like that. Our residents, like I talked about earlier, are often making $15, $20 an hour, and so the rent that they're able to afford is more like $600 a month or $800 a month, and not $2,500 a month. And so the subsidized housing that we build has multiple government funding sources, whether it's the tax credits or city, county, state funding. Those are all soft loans. So it's not a mortgage payment where you pay a fixed amount of money per month, like a bank mortgage. We get an approved budget, and then if we do better than the budget at the end of the year and we have positive cash flow, we distribute that cash flow to the various lenders pro rata for what amount that they owe to it. So even, for the extremely low income folks, even with fully subsidized housing where we don't have a bank mortgage, the rents from the tenants still don't keep up with the operational cost of maintaining a building. And so, the cost of maintaining a building is often around, $700 or $800 a month per unit. And so if your tenants are only able to pay $300 or $400 a month a unit, you still need an operating subsidy. So the biggest barrier right now that we have is the lack of operating subsidies. So you might have heard of the Section 8 program through the Housing Authority. What we do is we get a contract from the Housing Authority to have the vouchers assigned to the project instead of assigned to a tenant, where they can go find a market rate landlord to have the vouchers pay additional rent to pay more of a market rate rent, and they pay an affordable rent. So we get a contract with the Housing Authority, and that subsidizes the income from the residents, and then we're able to either leverage a mortgage or pay for social services, or operate the property with even lower incomes. The challenge is that the housing authorities are strapped for cash. The current administration in Washington is not generous with HUD, and their goal is to drive HUD into the ground, I think. And even in better times, the need for affordable housing far outstrips even the most generous of the Housing Authority budget. So, I mean, they're in high cost areas like Palo Alto and Santa Clara County. it's very difficult to operate the projects in addition to building them. Building them is difficult enough. Some of the strategies we've used very successfully in the last couple of years, SB 35, AB 2162, the by right streamlined approach where there's a locked in time for planning. And we just have to comply with objective standards instead of going through a very long CEQA driven process. Has been very helpful to speed up the land use approval process. And having one-stop funding in Santa Clara County where we can get Measure A funds, we can get housing authority vouchers and service funding all in one application, and then just need tax credits on top of that has been phenomenally helpful in bringing the time of carrying costs that it takes, for not having to carry the property 3 years while we're just trying to compile the amount of funding. So both of those have been helpful and are moving the needle. But the cost of housing, whether you're building affordable or market rate, factory built, it's all very expensive around here because labor is very expensive and land is very expensive.
Great, John, clearly you are an expert and I'm glad you are on the job working on these complex projects. So we're really lucky to have you in our area and serving our community.
Sure, thank you.
Other questions from working group members or comments?
One question for John, this is Lund. So when it comes to very low income housing, in terms of the subsidies, my experience has been those subsidies are available for primarily 100%, either very low income and low income. Do you guys have any sort of significant subsidies for projects that are, call it mixed, some market rates, some affordable?
We have talked to probably about 10 developers, market rate developers, about doing some kind of mixed project. The way the tax credit program works is that it would have to be a separate condo, like Opportunity Center is actually a separate condo for the housing component. And then there's a separate condo for the day use center that Life Moves runs. And so the affordable housing can only be low income housing tax credit. So it can't be a mixed development without it being separated like that. The challenge, unfortunately, is that we've never gotten to the point of even doing a development with a market rate developer, because their perception is that if there are affordable housing units mixed into the same building, into the same complex, particularly with permanent supportive housing, the stereotype is that, those people are more scary in some way, and that the rents or the sale price that will be generated from the market rate units will be impacted sufficiently so that they wouldn't be able to make the profit margin that they want. I don't know if that's true. I'm not a market rate developer. I'm not, fully in touch with what the realities of combining that would be. To my knowledge, it's not done very often, if at all, to have a affordable, deeply affordable housing project site on the same site as a market rate project. We do actually prefer to have a mix of uses. We do have a couple of 100% permanent supportive housing projects, and there's a lot of need there. It's more complicated to run those. We do like to have a mix. Our ideal mix is about 50% permanent supportive housing and then 50% very low income, and have everybody kind of mixed throughout the same building. And that works really well. We have a bunch of projects that have a mix of very low income and formerly homeless, special needs. And that's a very nice community mix. It's a very natural feel with a lot of peer connections and friendships and social networking support.
Great. We got time for about 2 more questions from the working group. Keith, do you have your hand up?
Yep.
Okay, great.
I just have a big picture question. One way of doing this would be to have a nonprofit like Alto Housing own the land and build it and rent it out, as opposed to having a co-op. So I'm not sure if Lisa or David want to address this. What's the trade-off between these two options?
Yeah, David or Lisa, do you want to address kind of how a co-op differs from kind of just a rental, affordable housing that's a rental unit?
Well, it really has to do with whatever goals your group has. if you want to get the highest return on the dollar and the most service to people, then you should do only nonprofit tax credit housing because that's where the biggest need is. However, there are large portions of the population who, when we talked about earlier, who are in the middle income group, they certainly cannot afford to buy a home, and they are paying about 40% of their income for housing if they're living in Palo Alto or that region. And so the question is, do you want to do anything for them? The two can't be mixed together, as John had said, because the tax credit laws are pretty strict. It is a little easier to build a limited equity co-op housing in terms of cost because the rules for condo development don't apply to limited equity co-ops. And so we're able to build them without firewalls and various other things that would ordinarily be there. So there's a savings there. The one thing that I would say is that limited equity cooperatives are a big interest these days, and I'm getting more and more calls about it. One of the suggestions that I've made to the people that have contacted me is there needs to be a sponsor class of shareholders. And I did that in the paper that I presented to you to say that, for example, what if the school district sponsored 25%, so 25 units in the co-op, and they put up $80,000 per each of those units to bring the cost down because that's equity, you're no longer borrowing that. What if the city did reserve 25% of the units for its employees? What if Apple and Google and other people put up 25% of that and reserved 25% of the units for their workers who wanted to live in a limited equity co-op? You can do that kind of a framework and obtain 10 to 20% of the equity capital that you need to make that number work. But those people have to know that their money is in for the long term. It will be repaid back over time. But I think that is about the only way that you're going to make a limited equity co-op work, because the costs are, the normal costs are just too enormous.
Great, thank you so much. We have one last question from Doria.
I was wondering how the limited equity co-op compares to condo units that we have for sale and are below market rate, but they're actually for sale. And I don't know all the details, and I think I don't know how many we have. I think it's not very many, but it is for people that have enough money to invest in a property, and they're deed restricted at a certain level. Only people at that AMI can go in. And then, but when they leave, they do get, I believe they make money, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel, off of the improvements they've made to the unit, which wouldn't be like a regular sale. And I was wondering how the co-op, is the co-op a better thing than that program?
Well, I have a perspective which is very favorable to limited equity cooperatives. Oh dear. I have seen around about 200 of these for sale, limited resale condos get sold into the market without the supervising authority knowing that that has happened. So I have seen around about $20 million in Davis stolen by people who knew how to get around it. So I don't like it because I think it's just fraught with appeals to fraud. So that's one of the dilemmas. The other element is that the condos usually end up always being at a slightly higher income group that needs to be the one to come in and get them. Whereas you can see by what I showed you that as each year goes by, the co-op becomes more affordable to the next income group. And so if you're talking about wanting to do more for people, you're going to do more for more people by doing a co-op than you are ever going to do with a condo. The other thing is that a condo has all of the real estate costs, realtor fees, mortgage fees, and they have to do it on each individual mortgage. In the co-op, when somebody leaves Dos Pinos, they pay $30 to the association for the cost of the paperwork of transferring that share to the next person. No realtor costs, no any other costs associated. So I think it's a much more efficient model.
Great. Okay, thank
Didn't
you.
you just say it was unworkable with land prices being what they are in this area?
Yep, it is.
Yeah, so I think his model, he was saying that the land that they got for their co-op came through a developer who, it sounded like, dedicated the land for the co-op or for middle income housing, and that was a way that they were able to get their land. Is that correct?
Right, yeah, and what I meant by that, Kirsten, is that that piece of land, the city could set aside, as it will, if you're going to have John do something there, he is not going to be buying that land at market value. So the city is going to have to transfer that land to him in a way in which there's no land cost. You would do the same with the limited equity co-op, although the limited equity co-op over time, through the money that it makes, it would be able to pay off the lease at a stronger position.
Just takes a long time. So we're going to close our speakers. Let's give them either a real clap or you can do some jazz hands for their great information. We're so lucky to have you. And hopefully you could be a resource for us as we go forward. You can leave if you've got other things to do tonight. We only have a little bit left in our meeting. We're going to hear from each of our working group members what their goal for affordable housing is. And working group members, it can be a goal like, I want this many number of units in this way. Maybe you've done some calculating, but it could also be an aspiration, right? When you think about affordable housing in the MVCAP, maybe your aspiration is that you want to be able to see a community that has everybody from a cook to, the captain of a fire brigade or something. You want middle income people and lower income people, whatever it is, that's your vision for how the NVCAP can help to provide affordable housing. And you'll have 1 minute. Nikki's going to time you. She'll come back on. When she comes back on, that means your minute is up. And so we'll go around and do that. I'm going to take notes of that and we'll see where we get at the end. So we're at 8:06. And I just wonder if anybody is feeling moved to start. What is your vision, your goal when it comes to affordable housing in the NVCAP area? If you don't raise your hand,
I can start.
All right, thank you, Keith. Jumping in.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the numbers, Palo Alto has produced almost no housing in the lowest two categories, and people sound surprised, but the funding that we have for that is so just drip and drap. So my aspiration would be to have a more reliable funding stream and a more significant funding stream. We should be opening a Wilton Court once a year and not once a decade. So it all comes down to the money.
Great, thank you. We did hear that today. It does come down to the money. Who wants to go next? Just jump right in.
I can go.
All right, thanks, Yunin.
So I want to have a model that can rest for a couple of years or 20 years that can help the community to increase the affordable housing to different level of low-income people, not just low and extreme low, but also for maybe, in Palo Alto, there are a lot of people, they are not extreme low-income families, but they cannot afford to live in Palo Alto, even live close by. So for these, especially for the people who work here, so I would like to see there's a combination of the different level of the low-income families. They are able to live here in either with rent or own a house.
Got it. Combination of incomes and both renter and ownership. Great. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. This is Lund. I'll go next because I agree with what Yunan just said. I think a combination. I think one of the beautiful things about the area, and that's something that should be encouraged moving forward, is welcoming to everyone. So having a combination of income ranges in the area.
Great. Continue to live into our history and our legacy as being a welcoming area. I love it. Who's next?
I'll go. I'm always worried I'm going to talk too long. I never seem to get under a minute, so I'll try to talk fast. So my goal for affordable housing is to do better in planning this area than we have in the past, even with everyone working so hard. And I do believe that volunteers and city staff and builders have all worked hard to make affordable housing and make less jobs. Somehow here we are. So my goals are to allow for the minimum number of office jobs possible in the study area, to create truly affordable housing using creative means as outlined on the list and by our speakers tonight. And I believe that unless we account for from extremely low all the way through to low, all we'll be doing is moving the extremely low income people further and further out. Because what will happen is as the low income people get houses built in Palo Alto or median income people, they will take places away from people closer into Palo Alto to the jobs. And then those people have to, so we're basically forcing super commutes on the poorest amongst us. And that bothers me a lot. So,
all right, you got someone.
I told you.
Well, it's your passion. You're overflowing with passion, and like me, very verbose. So it's not a bad thing. Who's next?
I'll go.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Lakiba and then Gail.
Okay. Well, my goal vision is that we actually have affordable housing. So I liked Yunan's suggestion. I like the idea of it being the opportunity for ownership as well as rentals. And there was a time and a day when Palo Alto was a bit more diverse, a range of incomes, a range of occupations, and where everybody got to connect with everyone. And so my son and grandchildren had to move away in order to afford housing. So I like the idea of this combination that I think would allow more diversity of income and people.
Great. About the income and it's about the people. Love it. Gail?
Yes. Okay, I would like to see a mixture of housing types on a large scale with various designs, number of stories, types, configurations, ownership models, and densities to provide real choices to people of various ages, incomes, and circumstances. I support a significant amount of affordable housing serving very low through middle income, incorporated in this area to support diversity and social justice. I envision this as an opportunity area with retail, office, and commercial uses as well, and we need to use a range of incentives. The mixture will make the area vibrant and accessible while working to develop and create a new engaged community. Without robust intensification, we will not be addressing the urgent housing shortage. If we don't do something now, it'll never change.
Great, and you may have to send me that if you want me to quote it you exactly.
I can give you this written, that'll help.
Great. Doria?
Okay, so I agree with Keith. What's really missing here is a reliable revenue stream for creating affordable housing. I would like to prioritize housing for the people that need it most, and I guess that would be the lower income AMIs and supportive housing is I think the correct term. I would like to do that while not increasing the problems associated with jobs housing imbalance and traffic in this area, knowing that there are options to do that we can explore, including alternative M And also I'm very interested in the co-op idea that was discussed, but I don't understand it well enough to know what that would be. And I am looking for an overall number of housing units in this area that does not vary dramatically from what we have in other parts of Palo Alto, and with the same development standards and the assumptions of what people need to live their lives well. And
Just a minute, Doria.
I'm not sure if this is the right place to talk about the overall number of units.
If you have a goal, we can say it, but we did get to 1 minute. Do you have a target number, or is
I don't have a target number. I kind of took the SV at home number and calculated it as an expression, 3,000 new units at the Santa Clara County average unit, people per unit, which is 2.97, so 3, could be up to 9,000 people, which is 150 people per acre. And when you express that as numbers of people per square mile, which is how densities are expressed for cities across the world, that would be 100,000 people per square mile, which is more than New York, which is Manhattan alone is 71,000 people per square mile.
I just want to stop you, Doria, because we got to get to other folks, but it sounds like you don't agree with that goal, but you don't have a different goal, which is fine. I'm not saying you should, but I don't want to type this up under you because it's not what you're advocating for.
Okay, I wasn't sure how much more we were going to have time to get into tonight, and
fortunately not much more because we're butting up against our closing hour.
Just to finish up, Palo Alto currently is 2,800 people per square mile. So those numbers are per square mile.
I could have finished up too.
Okay, well, we can come back to you if we have time. Okay, so we have some more folks who have not shared yet.
I haven't shared.
Go ahead, Terry.
Okay. I don't think this will come as any surprise, but I really think our city should focus, hopefully, on our greatest needs. Housing for those of low income and BMR abilities, residents. 70% of our housing should really be focused on finding solutions for those who obviously fix our cars, work in our restaurants, and clean our houses. Alternative M, which we've already sponsored, starts to accomplish that task. To make it possible, a citywide business tax is our best tool, as businesses are creating the increased housing demand that impacts every single one of us daily, especially our low-income workers. It's time to make this move, and Alternative M will help us accomplish that task. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Terry. Alex, I think you haven't gone. Is Alex and Angela, are you guys the only two left?
I can go.
Okay.
So I think that Palo Alto should just stay true to. You actually go back and look at the old phone directories and old fire insurance maps, you'll see that Palo Alto had a diverse range of housing, from boarding houses to mansions that occupied an entire city block, and everything in between. In my own work, I've done projects that have been like 50% affordable and low-income rentals with 50% market rate housing, and they've turned out perfectly fine. And I think that would be my goal for the Ventura area.
I want to make sure I captured what you said so eloquently, and I typed so poorly, Alex. I think that you were saying that Palo Alto has a history of diverse range of housing types, and that there's also diverse people in those housing types, from boarding houses to mansion. So that both the types of the housing are diverse and the occupants. And then you have done in your career or housing that is mixed income. Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
And then those projects turn out fine, and the neighborhoods are successful.
Yeah, and that was like 50%. So that's like 50% rental, 50% ownership.
Uh-huh.
And in the rental, it's low income and affordable rentals.
Got it. Great. And then Angela.
Okay, let me just make sure I'm, okay, yeah. So I would like to see housing available to people from very low income to middle income. People like grocery workers and waiters and teachers and nurses, all these people add to the quality of our lives in Palo Alto, and they should be able to buy or rent and live with their families in the city and not have to commute. This obviously would reduce the terrible traffic congestion that we have here and would reduce our carbon footprint, which really matters. I'd like to see us provide housing or find a way to provide housing for people who make very, very little, up to about 200% of the AMI, not just 120%, because below that amount, it's impossible to buy a family apartment. I do think it's possible to do this without a very high density because there's a huge amount of wealth collected here in Palo Alto. There must be some way of using that enormous wealth to support the less wealthy among us. And I actually think that a business tax would be one great way to subsidize things like the limited equity cooperative and community land trusts.
Great. Perfect. I think everyone got to go. We're at 8:20. Kirsten, is there anything that I missed from your?
I was just being snarky. Please
I
go
know
ahead.
you were, but I figured I'd come back to you anyways. And I took it all in good spirit, Kirsten. Okay, so we are at 8:21. I want to look to our participants who have been here to make sure we can have our closing comments. And then we're going to talk about our pathway forward from here. I will make sure everybody has a copy of these notes. And if you want to add something, you certainly can. Just, so we can continue to do what we've been doing, which is look for commonalities. And I think even just listening to each other, I hope we heard that there is a goal to help those who need the help the most, at the same time having it be across a range of incomes. And so I think that is a commonly held goal that we share. And also, I think a reality that we've also seen expressed, which is we need money for it and a sustainable source of funds. And that, I think in Angela's words, we are a community that hopefully can figure out a way to do that. And we can develop the funding source to be able to make some of these things come to life. Even if it's a cool idea like co-ops or more traditional housing, that we can have that. So really good stuff, you guys. Thank you for being prepared and for sharing with everybody. So I'm going to stop the screen share. And if you are a member of the public who's here, who would like to give any oral communications, please raise your hand at this time and we will call on you. Any member of the public who would like to give comments, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands raised. I do want to just thank Councilmember Lee Yaku, who is here, for being with us and for listening to our conversation. It's great to see you following our progress as we keep marching towards the future of this plan. So thank you for being here, Councilmember Koo. All right. So with that, Angela, do you want to go ahead?
I just wanted to thank the speakers again for spending their time with us, and I learned a lot from listening to all of you. Thank you.
Yes, I cannot say thank you enough. It was so great to have you with us. We really benefited a lot from you. Okay, so in terms of next steps, we had been trying to figure out a time for our next meeting, and we need more time as staff. So you guys gave us so much really good information. We have been going through the consensus documents that we've built and what the things were. And it's really good work, but it is a bit slower for us as staff than we had hoped. And I think slower in a good way, because we're really looking at everything, looking back at past meetings, trying to make sure we're capturing the different aspects of it. And so I know we had tried to set up a meeting for September 1st, but we're going to need to go a little bit deeper into September, unfortunately. And so Chitra will send out some information about that. But I think the result of it will be that when we come back, we'll have really been able to do some deep thinking and piecing together the pieces of consensus we have. And also hopefully some good questions that we can send out ahead of time of the meeting, so we're not rushing through that. So sorry that we won't be on the time schedule that we are trying to keep to, but we just need more time.
Is there anything we can do to help? And follow-up question, is there any homework you would like us to do to prepare?
I will think about that. I think part of it now is just we have so much richness. I mean, it's, like I said, it's a good problem to have. We just have a lot that we've talked about and shared, and we have a lot of aspirations. So it's just a matter of trying to talk it through. And we're getting to some level of detail too, is also part of it. You know, we're talking about what type of zoning relates to that thing that we talked about in that vision. So it's also just the level of detail we're getting to, which is good. It just is a process to go through. Gail?
Yes, my question is, will this next iteration, will this be staff prepared, or will you be working in conjunction with the consultants or conferring with some of the consultants that are on the original team?
This next iteration is just staff prepared. It is, even though I'm saying it's just, it is trying to take all of the things that we have said about what we would like to see in the alternative, in the plan area really, and then creating that into 2 draft alternatives. So it's trying to suss through, okay, we had some consensus around this thing, but sometimes the thing is still, you know, vague, and then we have to put it together with the other things, right? So we said we wanted a park here, bike lanes here, office here, housing there, retail there. We got to put it all together in a way that makes sense. And, you know, as you all saw, we didn't all agree on things. Some things we had a lot of agreement around, and it's easier. Some things we didn't. So we've got to kind of figure out, okay, well, where are the points of gravity? Maybe one point of gravity is over here, maybe another is over here, and where do we map that on to the other thing? So it's like a giant puzzle. It's fun, but it's a giant puzzle that we're moving things around. Angela?
Some people have been saying that our next meeting is our last meeting. Is that correct?
We do hope that our next meeting is the last meeting before we kind of have a go ahead to do what I think Gail was referencing, which is work with our consultant team to make these things look really pretty. What we give you is not going to be very pretty. I will tell you that right now. It may be as pretty as the Legos. That's what we can probably give you. And so we need to kind of refine that into something that's a little more professional from there to bring to the PTC. So I don't know that it'll be our last working group meeting ever. I do hope we have some touch points, but we are trying to get to, okay, here's the alternatives. Now we're going to make them pretty, more professional, and bring them forward to the PTC. I would probably like to touch base with folks before we go to the PTC meeting, so that you guys get a chance to see it before it's presented there. But you know, that can also be something we could structure. I know we're getting into the holidays, and I know people's schedules are odd, but so we can see what people's availability are and try to structure that in a way that it doesn't tax people overly at that time. So, yeah.
One more quick question. I've asked this before.
Probably the same answer then, but we'll see.
In this next iteration, will there be much consideration of economic feasibility?
There will be as much consideration of economic feasibility as we have given it previously, which is we had our consultant team to develop typologies of buildings that were financially feasible in the pre-COVID environment. Will we have significantly revised financial feasibility? It is not likely, because we don't have enough information about the post-COVID world. So there's going to be no adjustment to like a forecast of what real estate economics will look like. I think for a little while, because we need more data, even if we could afford it. And then also we just can't afford to have those revised right now. And so we've got to use the past as the best indication of the future, which is unfortunate, but it's kind of where we are right now. Doria, question that you have?
Did we ever get the final hydrologist report?
No, we will. We just sent that out to our city staff to review. So we will be coming up on that, getting that ready, and we can make sure we get that to everybody.
Okay, thanks.
But yes, good note. We want to try to work that into a future meeting too, somehow, some way. So maybe at the next meeting we can have a bit about the creek as well, if we can figure out how to manage that agenda. Okay, so it's 8:29 p.m. I want to just thank you all for your time, for your energy, your ideas, your passion. It really is, it's really remarkable, and it really means a lot. And like I said, it's given us a lot of really good stuff to work through, and I'm pretty excited. Sometimes, you know, it's difficult, but it's fun. This is the stuff that we get to do, trying to figure out how to shepherd this neighborhood into the future, which is, it's pretty exciting when you think about it. So all of our good iron sharpening iron is really good for that process. So thank you again. And as always, if you have questions, comments, reach out to myself. If you ever reach out to me, please copy Chitra and Claire on it, so I can make sure that we get responses to you in a timely manner. Anything else? Great. Okay. Well, we will close out this meeting and we will see you in September. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.